The apartment smelled of antiseptic and burnt coffee. It was early morning, and the 4 agents sat in their small kitchen, fatigued from their last mission. A pale light filtered through the windows, casting long shadows across the table. The silence was heavier than usual. There were no jokes, no jabs. This was because Scott, the one who usually poked fun at everyone, was the one with a chest wound. He leaned back carefully in his chair, one hand clutching his ribcage beneath his shirt, where the gore still stuck to cracked skin. His curls were damp with sweat, even though the room was cold.
So, who's going to bring me something sweet when you get back?
He said, unable to stand a second more of their uneasy silence. Melinda, the sharp-eyed tactician with a lopsided grin, cracked a smile.
You want Turkish Delight again, don't you?
She asked, entertaining his request.
I want something with chocolate this time. Because Turkish Delight is for people who haven't been stabbed by a devil's dagger,
Scott said, wincing as he shifted. He had a slight smile on his lips, but any closer observation at how he cast his eyes low would betray how he truly felt. They were going on another mission without him, and he hated that. Miriam leaned forward across the table, her expression unreadable. She always looked like she knew more than she was letting on, and now she could see what he didn't say. We don't like leaving you behind, you know, she said to him. Scott shrugged like it was nothing.
You shouldn't be dragging me around like a bullet magnet either. Just don't get yourself skilled, okay? And bring chocolate, the fancy kind.
He muttered cheekily. The 4th member, John, put a hand on Scott's shoulder comfortingly.
You rest. We'll be back by dusk,
he said. Scott believed them and saw them out with a silly grin, but dusk came and the sun dipped below the skyline without them returning. Melinda cursed as they reached the safe house. Claire, Miriam said, her voice taut. She took a moment to assess the warehouse they had just snuck into. Too clear, she said through gritted teeth. John swept the perimeter twice. There were no guards, no signals, just an empty building that had supposedly held the rogue asset they were chasing, and there was no one inside. Melinda kicked over a crate, the contents spilling over. One look at it made her stomach sink. The crate had been filled with decoys, blank folders, fake intel, more misdirection. This was never about the assets. This was about keeping us busy, Miriam deduced, looking up at the blinking light above the door. John's eyes narrowed with realization.
and we left Scott alone.
There were no more words needed. They moved fast. John was already dialing the emergency channel, but as he expected, there was no answer. It was obvious now that they targeted their hideout and the pen drive they kept. Now with Scott home alone, they might just get it. And kill Scott in the process. He pressed harder on the pedal. Scott had heard the knock. It was not a friendly knock, not the rhythmic one John always used, or the to and pause that Miriam preferred. This was hard, deliberate. He had already risen from the couch, teeth clenching against the pain in his side. He moved slow because he was still recovering. Danger was near, but any fast movement might render him more vulnerable. He was halfway to the kitchen, toward the hidden panel with a gun case, when the door exploded inward. 3 men, maybe 4, with black masks on and body armor marched in. They didn't say a word. They didn't need to. They only had to spot him, and they did it with ease. Scott barely made it into the hallway before the bullets started tearing into the walls. He ducked behind the counter, grabbing a kitchen knife.
You really want to try me? I haven't showered in 2 days and I've got nothing to lose.
He yelled out, though his voice cracked halfway through. But it came in anyway. The first one made it over the counter, but Scott slashed low, making a large gash in his thigh. The scream was immediate. Scott didn't hesitate. He took the man's gun, turned it, and fired blindly as pain screamed through his ribs. The second attacker clipped him in the shoulder before he got shot down. Scott fell backward. The breath knocked from his lungs. He dragged himself into the bedroom, slammed the door, and locked it, knowing it would only hold them for a few seconds. He hurriedly reached for the compartment under the bed for the drive. He was sure that was what they were after, and he had to keep it safe, so he stuffed it into his trousers. There was no way he was losing that. And now, he had to get out before he lost his life, but there was only one way out. The old laundry chute was just big enough if he didn't think too hard about his broken ribs. He crawled toward it, bleeding, his vision doubling, hearing only the crash of the door breaking behind him, and then the darkness closed around him as he went down the chute. They found him in the alley behind the building, half conscious, slumped against the dumpster with blood trailing down one arm and his breath coming in ragged gasps. Melinda reached him first, kneeling down and brushing Scott's matted curls from his forehead.
You stubborn bastard.
She muttered in relief when he moved with her touch.
I said, bring me chocolate.
Scott rasped, his eyes barely opened. We brought some, Miriam said softly, holding up a crushed bag from her pack. It contained Belgian truffles, though they were now slightly melted. And you better live long enough to eat them, she added. Scott let out a weak laugh that turned into a coughing fit. John had already pulled the medkit from his belt.
He's bleeding out. We need to move.
He said. Scott reached out for his hand and held it tightly.
What is it?
John asked, concern heavy in his voice.
The drive. It's on my balls.
There was silence, and then there was laughter. Scott tried to join in, but he ended up in a coughing fit.
You silly goose.
Melinda laughed as she pulled out bandages. Stay still so we can stop the bleeding, Miriam said, her voice stern, but with a wide smile on her face. Scott groaned and threw his head back softly. As they worked to treat the wound, Scott fumbled for the bag Miriam had set beside him.
Sweet victory,
he mumbled, lifting one truffle to his mouth with shaking fingers. Melinda blinked back something that might have been tears or fury.
Eat that and die? I swear I will bring you back just to kill you myself,
she said.
Well, it will be worth it,
Scott whispered. Then his eyes slid shut. A week passed. They patched the apartment, replaced the broken door, and cleaned the blood from the floorboards. Scott was back on the couch, heavily bandaged, but this time with a bowl of chocolates by his side and a new scar that bisected the older one.
You are never being left behind again,
Melinda told him.
Then you better start carrying me because I don't care how good that chocolate was. I'm not doing this again,
Scott said. They laughed for the first time in days. Miriam sat by the window, keeping watch. John tossed a truffle at Scott, who caught it with surprising speed for someone supposedly resting.
Yep, I still got it,
Scott said, popping it in his mouth. Yeah, barely, Miriam muttered.
But still, you did save yourself,
Melinda added. Scott raised his chocolate like a toast.
to being a liability with benefits.
They laughed. The end.